Hello, you wonderful people. There was an article published recently on how Nvidia is working on AI technology to create, quote, realistic digital humans, unquote. It's obviously an ad meant to generate interest from developers, but it does raise some interesting points about AI in games that we should discuss. First of all, the feature is cloud-based. Developers get an API that they can use to connect to a learning machine trained on processing natural language. You speak at the character. That gets turned into text by another cloud AI and fed into the language engine. There's a few parameters that you can tweak to change the flavor of the language you get back. So you can adjust your NPC to be tough, friendly, or any number of different things. The game gets dialogue text for your NPCs to say to the player, and you pair it up with another AI cloud service for animating characters to fit that line. So in reality, you have to subscribe to multiple cloud services for the feature to work properly. On paper, it looks like it could be an interesting feature, but let's dig a bit deeper. The thing that stands out the most is that it's a cloud service. That means that your game has to be always online and literally can't be played offline. Theoretically, games could have default dialogue and only use the service when you have an internet connection. But the point of the service is to avoid having to write generic flavor dialogue for your NPCs. So if you're going to use a service, then you'll simply rely on the cloud to provide dialogue. So in practice, all games that use this cloud will be required to always be online. For MMO games, this won't be an issue, but for single-player games, not being able to play without a constant internet connection is a critical weakness. And of course, lag would need to be taken into account. Presumably, the service will also be subscription-based. The most likely scenario is a cost per interaction model, so you pay every time an NPC gets a line of AI dialogue. This presents a problem in that games sell for a fixed price, so there's a hard cap on how many interactions you can have before the cloud service starts to cost more than the game itself. Another potential model is a fixed cost per game, but for a limited time. Music right now is licensed in a similar way, but that puts a hard cap on the life of a game. As we've seen with the GTA games, after a number of years, you have to stop selling it. With the GTA games, the original licensed music was just replaced with generic music. But removing AI dialogue features from a game is a lot more difficult. You'd have to rework significant portions of the game. So the most likely scenario is that games will stop being sold, and existing games will simply stop working after the license for the AI service expires. There's also the scenario that an unlimited license might be made available. But from Nvidia's perspective, running the cloud service involves an ongoing cost. So at some point, the cost of providing the service will be more than the income from licenses. It's exceedingly unlikely that Nvidia would choose to lose money, so we can rule out any kind of unlimited license that theoretically lasts forever. The license models we just discussed would work with MMOs or other always online games that require players to pay a regular subscription. You just include the cost of the AI clouds into the cost of the player subscription. But for single player games, relying on a service like this means that a game has a hard cap on how long you can play it. Maybe it will last for 5 years. So if games like Fallout 4 and Skyrim that still have massive audiences had used a system like this, then they'd be dead. Another factor is that the cloud service is only a natural language engine. That means that it only gives you generic responses. Developers will still have to handcraft all the main quests, the main quest dialogue, side quests, and most of the side quest dialogue. Otherwise, you'll end up with very generic feeling quest lines. So that leaves generic interactions as the domain of AI engines like these. So when NPCs say yes or no, it will just be in different ways. They're still saying yes or no, the engine won't change that. When you talk to random NPCs in cities, you can avoid the same line being repeated over and over again. It will be variations of the same line, but it won't be exactly the same line. At first, that will add variety to interactions to NPCs, especially filler NPCs. But players are fundamentally drawn to important dialogue. You pay attention to quest dialogue and important characters. And you pay attention because it matters, not because it's got a lot of variety. Players don't sit around listening to random filler conversation from NPCs, primarily because players know that it doesn't matter. it's just flavor. One of the big criticisms of Fallout 4's conversation system was that conversations tended to boil down to different versions of yes. It ultimately didn't matter what you said, it just got different flavor of dialogue as a response. As a result, players ended up dissatisfied by Fallout 4's dialogue. That wasn't because there was a lack of variety, it was because the dialogue ultimately didn't matter. Being able to express your choices, not the variety of flavored text you get, is the key to an engaging dialogue system. I suspect that the same will apply to AI-powered NPC dialogue. At first, people will be interested in what responses they can get. Big YouTubers will make compilations of NPCs saying all sorts of stupid things, probably involving different ways to say poop or swear. And it will be amusing for a bit, but ultimately it won't make games dramatically different. If I was to make a simile, a greater variety of flavor dialogue would be like having a bunch of spices when you're cooking. It helps to make a dish taste better, but you can't make a dish out of spices only. They can only enhance what's there, they can't be the dish. Same with AI-powered dialogue. It might act like a spice by enhancing the flavor of NPC dialogue, but if the game isn't good in the first place, it won't make a whit of difference. So it's fair to say that services like these may slightly enhance how good games are. But at the same time, the cost of hard capping the life of a game is pretty significant. Overall, it's unlikely that such services will be worthwhile, at least for now. Working through the limitations of the service being cloud-based, say for example if you had the option of running the AI locally, and the likely license issues would do much to make the benefits worthwhile. In the future you might see true AI, and games becoming more like simulations than the pre-scripted scenarios we see now. So games might become more like 3D versions of Dwarf Fortress. Walking around in Night City might have truly spontaneous events that the NPCs do on their own. That would be absolutely amazing. But I wouldn't hold my breath on that. We're just nowhere near that yet. There is one scenario where a system like this could help developers. Instead of calling the cloud service on a real-time basis, developers could call the system to generate dialogue as they develop the game. If the system doesn't need training for every game, and you could save both the dialogue and the NPC animations, this would work as a way to save time on the dialogue of filler NPCs. So if your game is set in a city, say Cyberpunk or GTA, where you expect a lot of random NPCs as you walk the streets, then you could use a system like this to quickly punch out a variety of fluff dialogue that could be used if the player were to speak to them. That would avoid the license and cost issues with single-player games, because you could simply call the system once and save the output and use it in your game. It wouldn't add to the flavor of the game in a way that a real system would. Players would still see a set of predetermined dialogue just like they can now, but it would help save developers significant effort to produce a similar outcome. So from that perspective, I can see a scenario where developers, small teams in particular, could benefit a lot from a system like this to reduce the burden of creating and animating fluff dialogue. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Feel free to leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified when new videos come out. See you soon.